I welcome one and all for the presentation of pre-papers. The session will be chaired by Dr. G. Ramanujam. Over to the chairperson.
Good morning, one and all. This morning we are having the free paper session. Without further delay, let me go to the first candidate. We'll have Dr. Siddhatma Arampadi. And the topic is a study on psychiatric morbidity and its correlates among mothers of children with intellectual disability disorder in northern Karnataka. And the time allotted for all is 5 minutes.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, now you can. I can hear.
Sir, can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Today I will be presenting a paper on the topic of a study on psychiatric morbidity and its correlates among mothers of children with intellectual disability disorder in northern Karnataka. So worldwide, the prevalence of mental retardation is as high as 2.3%. The mental retardation produces psychological, social, and financial distress to the whole family, particularly parents, as they are usually the constant caretakers. Mothers of these children, being primary caregivers for their children, undergo more psychological distress than other members of the family. The objective of this study was to identify the prevalence of psychiatric morbidity and find its correlates among mothers of children with intellectual disability. The inclusion criteria for the child with MR were a child diagnosed with MR according to ICD-10 and those children aged 3 years or above. For mothers of child with MR were females aged in the reproductive age group, that is 18 to 45 years, having a child diagnosed with MR according to ICD criteria, and children should, the mother should be the primary caregiver of the child. The exclusion criteria were for child with MR were MR with epilepsy or any other neurological conditions, MR with other psychiatric morbidities or any other physical disability, or certain syndromes or medical or surgical conditions of which the MR was part of. And for exclusion criteria for mothers were single mothers, widows, separated and divorced, those with more than one child with disability, or those mothers with major mental illnesses or current psychiatric illness on treatment, or with other chronic psychiatric conditions. The methodology, which was a cross-sectional study conducted on 133 mothers of mentally challenged children in outpatient department of KIMS Hubli. The information regarding socio-demographic data was collected using a semi-structured proforma. The psychiatric morbidity was assessed using Mini plus 5.0.0 scale. Coming to the results, so the majority of our subjects received a diagnosis of somatization disorder. Out of the total of 133 subjects, 52 were diagnosed with psychiatric morbidity, and majority of them had somatization, followed by dysthymia, followed by major depressive disorder, followed by GAD. Coming to the socio-demographic variables, so the majority of our subjects were primary educated. They were housewives hailing from a below poverty line socio-economic status from a rural background, and majority of the children were of mild IDD. And coming to the distribution, so majority of the, as highlighted, majority of the psychiatric morbidity was found in mothers who had children with mild MR, followed by those with moderate MR, then severe MR, and then profound MR. The mean age of mothers found to be 33.48 years, and majority had completed primary education, and most of them were housewives from rural background, from lower socioeconomic status. And children were diagnosed with mild mental retardation. Coming to the discussion part, in the current study, the total psychiatric morbidity in the mothers of mentally retarded children was found to be 39.1%. According to the National Mental Health Survey of 2016, the lifetime prevalence of psychiatric morbidity is around 13.7%. So our study has a much higher prevalence, which could be explained by the demands of caregiving, tremendous amounts of stress that the mothers undergo on a daily basis, social stigma, and a lack of awareness of the condition. Our study did have a few limitations. It was conducted in a tertiary care center, and the results cannot be generalized. And the personality traits of the mothers might have influenced their handling of stress and the subsequent psychiatric morbidity. In conclusion, it is important to address their issues as wholesome, including financial, social support, and family relations, and help them develop effective coping strategies to handle the burden of caregiving. Developing self-help groups to relieve stress and to discuss problems among themselves to find solutions is important. Training of healthcare teams, which includes doctors, the ASHA workers, and the rest of the periphery, as well as NGOs to educate the family regarding the condition of the child, to bring awareness to approach to specialist care earlier for the children, and help the family and parents train the children would help reduce the burden on caregivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chidatma. Just two questions. Why did you exclude MR with seizures and other thing and syndromes where MR is a part?
Sir, we kept because that extra morbidity would have. We just wanted to see with MR, sir. Even though MR is associated with the other neurological conditions usually, we wanted to make sure that it is specific to that condition alone. Because then there is additional burden. If there is another neurological illness, the parents will have an extra burden. So it might be a confounder. So we excluded that, sir.
Okay. I think that's the same reason why you excluded single mothers, widows.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. Single mothers, widowed. So we wanted to be specific to the MR part, sir.
Is there any correlation between the severity of MR and the percentage of
majority of them are the majority of psychiatric morbidities is actually found with the mild MR children rather than the profound, rather than the more severe.
Yeah. Mild MR is common logically.
Logically, it should have been, but in our, it should have been more with the those with profound MR. But in our study, it was we were not able to find such correlations.
Okay. No. I mean, you have categorized into mild, moderate, and severe. I was asking about the score of IQ. And the higher the IQ score, the more prevalence. Probably you can do it in a further follow-up study or analysis. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Next, we move on to Rinku Salim. And the topic is somatic symptoms and medical comorbidities in schizophrenia patients, a cross-sectional study. Rinku, you can start.
Okay, sir. Good morning, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are very much sure.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Rinku from PES Medical College. My title for the study is Somatic Symptoms and Medical Comorbidities in Schizophrenia Patients, a cross-sectional study. Coming to the introduction, schizophrenia is a complex mental health disorder which is characterized by an array of symptoms including delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech or behavior, impaired cognitive ability. The early onset of the disease along with its chronic course make it a disabling disorder for many patients and their families. People with schizophrenia have a higher risk to have hepatitis, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, overweight, sexual dysfunction and obstetric complications. This high vulnerability is associated with high rates of preventable risk factors such as smoking, alcohol consumption, use of street drugs, poor dietary habits and lack of exercise. Moreover, some antipsychotic medication used to treat schizophrenia have been associated with higher incidence of physical diseases. Schizophrenia patients especially run a higher risk of diseases and early death. Multiple factors contribute to this risk. Intrinsic causes are the mental and physical stress accompanying the disorder, as well as the negative symptoms such as cognitive retardation and loss of initiative. Extrinsic causes include unhealthy lifestyle, smoking, consumption of fast food, lack of exercise, and side effects of pharmacotherapy. The majority of schizophrenia patients contact the general practice rather than frequently, yet they often face delay in diagnosis and treatment of somatic comorbidity. It has long been recognized that people suffering from schizophrenia often also in the prodromal phase, when about 50% of the patient visit their family physicians complaining of weakness, backache, and so on. Pains in the arms or legs were often attributed to arthritis or rheumatism. Cutaneous sensations other than pain were sensations of tingling or numbness in 5 patients, heat or cold in 6, and vibration or dryness in each. Urinary frequency or urgency was one of the most common autonomic symptoms. Gastrointestinal symptoms were nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Cardiovascular symptoms other than pain and flushing were palpitation. There has been a lot of study regarding somatic symptoms and other psychiatric illness like depression, but there are only fewer studies on somatic symptoms in schizophrenia. Coming to the aim to assess the prevalence of somatic symptoms and medical comorbidities in schizophrenia patients, materials and methods. This cross-sectional study was conducted in PSIMSR Kuppam for a duration of 3 months after obtaining the ethical clearance from the Institutional Ethical Committee. The patient diagnosed with schizophrenia were contacted in the psychiatry department of PSIMSR. Purposive sampling was used to include patients diagnosed with schizophrenia as per ICD-10 criteria. Details of the study were explained to them and written. Informed consent was obtained from them. Then interview was conducted and tools as mentioned in the methodology was applied, which took around 40 minutes. All the details were entered in a specifically prepared pro forma individually for each subject. Total 50 patients fulfilling the inclusion criteria were included in the present study. The inclusion criteria were patients diagnosed with schizophrenia as per ICD-10 criteria and who are above 18 years of age and who were in remission, assessed by PANAS score less than 3 for each item. Patients with schizoaffective, post-schizophrenic depression, intellectual disability, visual, hearing impairment, acute psychosis, alcohol dependence, epilepsy, and other patients who were not willing to be part of the study were excluded. A specially prepared online self-reported questionnaire included socio-demographic data, including age, gender, background, patient's income, etc. The medical comorbidities of the patient were taken into account, which were diagnosed by a physician with relevant clinical interview, examination, and laboratory investigations. Coming to this tool use, somatic symptom scale 8. The 8-item somatic symptom scale was developed as a brief patient-reported outcome measure of somatic symptom burden. The SSS-8 is an abbreviated 8-item version of PHQ-15 questionnaire. The PHQ-15 scale assesses the presence and severity of common somatic symptoms and is among the most widely used and the best validated self-report measure of somatic symptom burden. Questions included were stomach or bowel problems, back pain, pain in the arms, legs, or joints, headache, dizziness, chest pain, or shortness of breath, feeling tired or having low energy, trouble sleeping. Cutoff scores identified individuals with no 0 to 3, low 4 to 7, medium 8 to 11, high was 12 to 15, and very high was 16 to 32. Somatic burden. SSS-8 has good reliability, used and reliable scale. Coming to the results, total of 50 patients fulfilling the inclusion criteria are included in the present study. Among them, 52% were males and 48% were females, with mean age of patients 42.18. Among all the patients, 82% were married individuals and 36 were with formal education. 62% were unemployed, majority belonging to nuclear type of family, that is 62%, and 68% had an income less than rupees 10,000. The comorbidities were seen in 40% of patients included in present study. Among them, 26% were hypertension, 8% were hypothyroidism, and 6% were diabetes mellitus. The somatic symptom scale showed a burden of majority with medium scores in 52%, 8 to 11, followed with low burden in 30%, 4 to 7. 16% with high burden, 12 to 15, and only one patient with very high somatic symptom burden, in them 16 to 32. These are my tables which show the values which I earlier mentioned in my results. This is a somatic symptom scale. In the somatic symptom scale, low somatic symptom were seen in 30%, medium was seen in most of the patients, that is 52%, and high was seen in 16%, and very high was seen only in 2%. This chart shows the presence of medical comorbidities in schizophrenia patients, which is diabetes was around 6 to 7%, hypertension was 28%, and hypothyroidism was 8%. Coming to discussion, the current study includes 50 patients who met the inclusion criteria. 52% were males and 48% were females among them with mean age, and the comorbidities were seen in 40%. In a study by Out, MJ et al., recorded patients suffering from schizophrenia and related psychosis are at a high risk of developing diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, lung diseases such as COPD, hypothyroidism, and vision problems. In another study by Nishant et al., the patients had a mean age of 35 plus or minus 10 years with mean duration of illness of 8.3 to 0.53 years. Severity percent were detected to have a comorbid physical condition. Common conditions included hypertension, diabetes, and anemia, whereas in our study, 50% patients, in that 26% were hypertension, 8% were hypothyroidism, and 6% with diabetes mellitus. In this study, somatic symptom scale showed a burden of majority medium score, 52%, followed with low burden of 30%, and 16% with high burden, 12 to 15, and 1% with high somatic symptom. Premature mortality and disability could be reduced if more emphasis was placed on implementing strategies that effectively prevent modifiable risk factors from the first psychotic episode and improve early recognition of physical illness, thereby reducing the burden of physical comorbidities and leading to improved health outcome. Finally, it is critical to treat physical comorbidities promptly and assertively from the appearance of the first symptom of psychotic disorder in order to improve treatment outcomes and reduce suffering in patients with schizophrenia. Coming to conclusion, there is a higher prevalence of somatic symptom burden among patients diagnosed with schizophrenia, and also this is identification at the earlier period will help to improve the quality of life and also increase the lifetime productivity of the individual and society. The patients also showed presence of higher prevalence of medical comorbidities. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rinku. Just a question. Was there any correlation between the severity of the disease and prevalence of the physical somatic symptoms?
Actually, sir, we tried to find a correlation, but there was no significant correlation we could find between the severity as well as the appearance of comorbidities, sir.
And the drug use, number of drugs, sometimes the more number of drugs we use, they can also produce the... So.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't have any analysis on the amount, number of drugs used and prevalence of somatic symptoms?
No, sir. Basically, we didn't look into that factor. We just generally checked for physical comorbidities and somatic symptoms in patient. We didn't take that factor into account, sir.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, sir.
And the next candidate is Nikhil George, and I request him to be on time, to finish on time. The time allotted is 5 minutes. And his topic is atypical presentation of depression with catatonia, a case report. Dr. Nikhil, you can start now.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
My topic is atypical presentation of depression with catatonia, a case report. Introduction: catatonia is a clinical syndrome of marked behavioral irregularities, including motor, motor excitement or immobility, negativism, stupor, echolalia, or echopraxia. Prevalence of catatonia is 31% and 17% in mood disorders and acute psychotic disorders, respectively. Catatonia can occur in the context of neurodevelopmental, psychotic, bipolar, depressive, and medical conditions. ICD-11 has made a separate diagnostic group for catatonia, emphasizing its occurrence with multiple conditions. Besides catatonia being a rare syndrome, the atypical features of depression in this patient makes this case unique. Coming to case description, we present before you Mr. Y, 55-year-old male, BCom graduate, retired accountant, third among 4 children, married since 28 years from an upper middle class family. The presenting complaints were excessive worries and decreased sleep since 4 months, decreased interaction since 2 weeks, fearfulness since 1 week. He was not taking any oral feeds since 2 days. History of presenting illness: Y returned from Gulf following valvular heart disease and underwent an open heart surgery under general anesthesia 1 year back. His daughter's marriage was 4 months away and he started being worried and had decreased sleep. But since 2 weeks, he found it difficult to interact with relatives and wanted to stay alone most of the time. He also found loud sound disturbing. His worries about successfully conducting marriage had increased further. These difficulties were more in the afternoon, but he went about the preparations of marriage with a lot of difficulty. 1 week back, he was seen fearful and had stopped talking even to wife. On the day of marriage, that is 2 days back, he stopped talking completely even to the guests and was staring at them. Once he returned home, he was seen lying on bed and did not take food or water. When his wife tried to interact with him, he was not responding to them, and he was found holding saliva and not passing urine, and hence he was brought to hospital. There was no history of head injury, seizure, fever, diplopia, substance use, hearing voices, increased activity or confidence. He was evaluated by neurologists and psychiatrists and admitted in psychiatry department. Lorazepam challenge test showed some improvement in his speech, but he continued to take no feeds in spite of treatment with lorazepam 4th-hourly. He had anxious premorbid traits, no significant family history or past history could be elicited. Coming to examination, in casualty, vitals were stable, no pallor, icterus, cyanosis, clubbing, or lymphadenopathy were elicited. Rigidity was present, reflexes were normal, power was normal in all 4 limbs. Patient lied supine with staring eyes. He opposed every passive movement. There was marked absence of spontaneous movements and was mute. He took odd postures with his hands spontaneously. Stupor was elicited, catalepsy, mutism, negativism, and grimacing was elicited. Coming to mental status examination, as on 8th day of admission, that is after 3rd MECT, modified electroconvulsive therapy, he was conscious, alert, psychomotor activity was decreased, minimal spontaneous relevant coherent talk, decreased tone and volume. In thought, I could elicit a delusion of persecution, secondary non-bizarre, that his enemies are monitoring him by cameras and planning to hurt him. And he had ideas of hopelessness, helplessness, and worries. His mood was sad and affect was depressed. It was decreased in range and it was appropriate, stable, reactivity was decreased. Perception, no anomalies could be elicited. Primary mental functions, attention was aroused but not sustained. Insight, grade 2 on a scale of 0 to 5. Investigations like MRI, EEG, hemogram, thyroid, liver and renal function tests, electrolytes, CPK, ECG, CSF study were within normal limits. Coming to management, patient was started on IV fluids, lorazepam 2 mg, 112 dosage, sertraline 100 mg and olanzapine 10 mg. He was catheterized. Consent for MECT was taken from relatives. Fitness from anesthesia department was taken and 4 MECTs were given. Improvement was noted right from the 3rd MECT. He was continued on sertraline for another 6 months. Coming to discussion. Catatonia syndrome was delineated in 1874. It carries high risk of mortality and morbidity. Its prevalence among psychiatric population is 6 to 38%. Management of underlying psychiatric disorders, high-dose benzodiazepine treatment, and MECT remains the mainstay of treatment. In this patient, depression was diagnosed after the patient had improved. In any case, treatment of catatonia symptoms were the priority. Premorbid anxious traits were studied as a background for current presentation. Stringent monitoring of vitals and safety of patient was essential. Psychoeducation of bystanders was all the more necessary as they were unaware of these manifestations. Following failure of treatment with benzodiazepine, patient was started on MECT. They were educated regarding warning signs of depression. In case of recurrent and resistant catatonia, there is some evidence for use of clozapine. We would like to increase the awareness regarding depression and catatonia through this case. My references are as given.
Thank you, Dr. Nikhil. Just a few clarifications. What is atypical in this case?
In this patient, sir, the difficulty of the symptoms were more in the evening, and it was not the depressed which were reported to us per se, and clarity regarding the diagnosis were lacking at the initial phase of.
So he presented with catatonia.
Yes, sir.
Depression can present as catatonia.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just what is the first episode, isn't it?
It was the first episode, sir.
Okay.
That led to the further lack of clarity regarding the diagnosis, sir, other than catatonia.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next, we move on to Dr. Shivani Shah. The topic is psychological stress among medical residents during COVID-19 pandemic.
So can you all see the slide?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Shivani Shah. I'll be presenting a paper on psychological stress among medical residents during COVID-19 pandemic. It's not moving, just hold. So actually, I'm not able to move my slide. I'll be just doing it again. Just hold. Give me a second. Yeah, sorry. The introduction. The current pandemic attributed to the novel severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus.
We are not able to see your slides.
Okay. Can you see my slides or no?
No.
Okay. I don't know what's happening. Now?
Now I can see.
No, but the thing is, I'm not able to move my slides if I'm doing this, so I don't know. Should I try it again?
I think you need not present in slideshow. You can just.
Okay, fine. Okay.
I think that if you go to the slideshow mode, sometimes it strucks.
Okay, so I'll just say that. It has affected all the medical professionals. This virus strain bears a striking resemblance to the 21st century viruses like the SARS-CoV-9 and the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. COVID-19 is reported to be a zoonotic virus with bats.
Doctor, we are not able to see your slides.
Okay, so but the thing is, when I'm trying to do it, it's not happening. So.
Okay, ma'am, could you turn on your camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
So should I try once again if I'm able to do it?
Okay. Now we are able to see your screen. Yeah.
The slides are visible?
Yeah, visible. This is fine.
COVID-19 is reported to be a zoonotic virus with bats being the possible origin and the pangolins as a probable intermediate host. In India, the first confirmed case of COVID-19 was reported on January 30th, 2020. As a containment initiative, the nation was placed on a total lockdown since early hours of 25th March 2020. With the start of the phase 1 lockdown, all diagnosed cases of COVID-19 underwent contact tracing and potential contacts, including the health care workers, were quarantined or isolated. The medical professionals are more susceptible to be infected and are significant risk of adverse mental health outcomes due to the long working hours, risk of infection, shortages of protective equipment, loneliness, physical fatigue, separation from families, along with discrimination and stigma. This widespread outbreak is also associated with adverse mental health issues like anxiety, depressive symptoms, obsessive compulsive disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The aims and the objectives were to evaluate the psychological stress among postgraduate medical residents during the COVID-19 pandemic and to find out the stress among various fields of medical professionals working in different sectors. The materials and methods used were, it's a type of an observational study, 82 number of participants. The inclusion criteria was age, which was around 20 to 30 years, medical students working in tertiary COVID hospitals, and the residents consenting for the study. The tool used was the perceived stress scale developed by Cohen, Kamrick, and Molestein. The result and the observation was, on basis of the gender, about 24 female residents fell under the moderate perceived stress as compared to 15 male residents. Stress perceived on the basis of hospitals, the residents those who were working in the private hospitals went through a considerable amount of stress. And on the basis of the specialty, the residents who were pursuing MD were more stressed as compared to MS. Discussion. The postgraduate residency is frequently distressing. This study shows the residency-related pressure among the residents working in a tertiary care hospital during COVID-19. The survey was carried out in the time of COVID-19, where the residents were the frontliners and were fighting courageously like the war in the warlike situation. Stress among postgraduate residents in COVID-19 arises from various aspects of disturbance from routine. Stress among postgraduate residents in COVID-19 arises from various aspects of disturbance from routine. This includes social isolation, interpersonal distancing, fear of contracting COVID-19, long working hours, the loss of the academic year, education being at stake, and not able to meet their loved ones, and the fear of losing them. There is a need for the reduction of stress and psychological distress among the postgraduate residents. The important measures are the social support, the clear communication and the distribution of tasks, flexible working hours, and the utilization of psychiatric help without any stigmatization. Screening for the mental health problems, psychoeducation, and psychosocial support will help in the prevention of the serious mental health issues among the residents. So the conclusion was, this study identified that residents working during COVID-19 pandemic went through a considerable amount of stress at their workplaces. The focus should be made on how to cope with the existing scenario and to help and to seek help of a mental health professional in times of need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shivani. Just a few clarifications. And
Yes,
did your
sir,
study take into account that whether they had already a pre-morbid psychiatric problem, or did you exclude or something like that?
Yes, sir, that was excluded. I didn't take anyone who already had a
Okay,
pre-existing
Very good.
mental or
And was
physical
there
problem.
any correlation between the hours of work, specialities, or something like that? Did you?
So specialty-wise, broad specialty was done. That was MD versus
Yeah, you
MS.
said MD
No.
more than MS.
Yes, sir, but not the number of working hours.
Emergency rooms. Like okay. I think probably can do another. This is a very starter study, and it's a nice study. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
So we move on to the next candidate, and he's Adari Kalamaduri. And the topic is evaluating S100B protein as a serum biomarker for psychiatry disorders. Kalamaduri.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Yes, you can start.
visible?
Your screen is visible.
Hello?
Yeah, your
Are
screen
the
is-
slides visible, sir?
No, not the slides. It says you are sharing screen. Your screen is visible.
Yeah, okay. Am I audible?
You are audible, very much audible.
Okay, sir. I'm starting.
Yeah, now it's visible.
Good morning to everyone. My name is Kala Madhuri, third year postgraduate. Today my paper is evaluating S100B as a serum biomarker for psychiatric disorders. In diagnosing a patient with psychiatric illness, we solely rely on history taking and psychological assessments. We are in need of other investigational methods to diagnose these disorders. This novel biomarker S100B can be used to aid in this dataset. It is a growth and differentiation factor released from the glial cells from the CNS. It can be easily assessed in human serum and a useful parameter for glial activation and injury, which is linked to brain damage and psychiatric disorders. We have taken a sample of 100 inpatients in psychiatric ward and done over a period of 8 months. We have included adult patients with established psychiatric
Kala Madhuri, your voice is
based on
also
the
breaking and your slides are not too. Yes, now it's showing up. Okay. You can.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, audible. Now you are audible.
So one second.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. We have included adult patients with established psychiatric diagnosis based on the ICD-10 criteria and excluded who have denied to give the consent or denied the investigation. The results of my study are in the socio-demographic profile, the age-wise distribution among our study subjects, the mean age was 45 years. We found with increasing age in psychiatric disorders and with elevated S100B was found to be statistically significant with a p-value of 0.05. In gender-wise distribution, we found no significant relation between gender and elevated levels of S100B with a p-value of 0.62. This is the distribution of psychiatric disorder in my sample. Almost 26% of the patients were schizophrenia, followed by alcohol use disorder and depressive disorder and substance use disorder, followed by bipolar affective disorder, organic brain syndrome with behavioral disturbances, and panic disorder. Among the sample, almost 18% of the patients have elevated levels of S100B protein. We observed positive correlation with elevation of biomarker with some psychiatric disorders. We have applied one-way chi-square test and it was found to be statistically significant with a p-value of 0.02. This is a pictorial diagram showing the distribution of disorders among the positive sample. Almost 50% of the sample was schizophrenia, followed by depressive disorder and organic brain syndrome and alcohol use disorder. Even though the majority of the sample was schizophrenia, when it was taken as positive samples with the population taken by disorder, we have seen that organic brain syndrome is in par with schizophrenia, which is known to have glial pathology already. This is the pie diagram showing depressive disorders. In our study, we found positive correlation with major depressive disorder and elevated levels of S100B, but no correlation with bipolar affective disorder and moderate depression. Even in the major depressive disorder, out of the positive sample, almost 75% of the patients were major depressive disorder with psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, and the remaining were major depressive disorder with psychosis. In discussion, in our study, we found that correlation with increasing age and psychiatric disorder was found. Like my study, few have shown positive correlations in schizophrenia, but in most of the studies, they have found no linkage between the age and the elevated levels. Whereas in case of adults, a meta-analysis done by Schleuter et al., they have found that in older adults, it was higher in compared to the younger adults. Same is seen in case of major depressive disorder than the bipolar disorder in comparison with the control. Whereas in our disorder, we found only in the major depressive disorder but not in bipolar disorder. In gender, no relation was found in my study, and it is in par with other studies where in schizophrenia most have found no relation with the gender and the raising levels. And in other mood disorders, most studies do not show any significant impact with the gender. Correlation with the disorders. Positive correlation was found with some of the psychiatric disorder in our study are schizophrenia, depression, and organic brain syndrome with behavioral disturbances and alcohol use disorder. In a study done in schizophrenic naive patients, they have found to be higher levels than healthy control group. And in mood disorders, they are found in manic and depressive episodes have higher levels than the healthy control groups. The limitations in our study is we have taken heterogeneous patient group, and we are unfortunate to not include major mental illness like obsessive compulsive disorder, and it would have been better if we taken into account the confounding factors such as BMI, diabetes mellitus, and psychotropic medications. In concluding, the glial damage or dysfunction may play a role in the pathogenesis in some psychiatric disorders, but needs further research. This can be used as a screening instrument in diagnosing psychiatric disorders, and the generalized use of measurement of this biomarker in clinical setting might be helpful in appeasing the patients for drug complaints who lack insight. These are my differences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalamadri. That was a nice, interesting study. Just a few questions, and you pose it as a new novel potential screening for psychiatric illness. So, did you have any data on the prevalence of this S100B protein in normal people?
Sorry, sir, I haven't had.
Okay. Even it can be positive. There can be false. Good screening should have a sensitivity as well as a specificity.
Yes, sir. Actually, sir, it was found to be positive in some cases where they have higher BMI and metabolic syndrome like diabetic mellitus. These have to be taken into account, sir. In these patients, they found higher levels, sir.
Yeah, I think we need further studies for a control group with normal people.
Yes, sir.
This is just an eye opener study you have done. And also it is positive mainly in schizophrenia.
Yes, sir. Schizophrenia and depressive disorders as well, sir.
Depressive disorders. Okay.
In depressive disorder, major depressive has a much more role than moderate depressive or bipolar affective disorders.
So you have excluded neurological conditions, any comorbid neurological conditions, okay, which can be a confounding factor. Okay. Thank you, Kalamadri.
Thank you, sir.
We move on to the final candidate, Dr. Miller. The topic is COVID-19 and its impact on children and their mental health, a case series. Over to Dr.
Good morning, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
I'll proceed to share my screen. So my slides are visible?
Yeah.
I'll start. My topic of discussion is impacts of COVID-19 lockdown on children and their mental health, a case series. This is abstract of my paper. Introduction. Most of the COVID-19 lockdown were very limiting and people found it too hard to adjust. The prolonged closure of schools and lockdown at home can cause drastic effects of the mental health of children. Quarantine by itself can cause variety of negative consequences on the mental health of a child. Along with the novel virus outbreak, more anxiety and uncertainty were prevalent among all ages of people. School plays an essential role in the growth and development of a child's cognitive, emotional, social, and psychological makeup. With lockdown extending for months, schools remained closed and children were confined to their homes. The lack of proper routine and also very minimal interaction with anyone other than families were present. Most age-appropriate behavior were taken out of context and were described in a pathological sense. It has been indicated that compared to adults, this pandemic may have long-term adverse consequences on children and adolescents. The following three cases describe normal behavioral changes during lockdown that would otherwise be considered abnormal. The first case, where an 8-year-old boy studying third grade at a private school was brought by his mother with complaints of gaze avoidance, especially with his mother, sudden crying spells without any apparent reason, repeatedly saying that he is not a good boy, and a refusal to attend online academic classes. Detailed history showed that after lockdown began, he was always at home. He was not allowed to go out and play as well as interact with his peer groups. His school started online classes from July 2020. Every day, the child would complete his morning routine with the help of his mother. He would attend the online classes that continued for 2 to 3 hours per day. He was allowed to use smartphone to browse the internet and play games for 2 hours per day. One day on browsing, he accidentally stumbled upon a mermaid picture. His immediate reaction to this picture was fear along with curiosity. Following this, he began ruminating about this picture of the mermaid. Gradually, whenever he saw a mother or any woman, he would start get thoughts of the mermaid picture that he saw. Upon looking at his mother's hips or the hips of any other woman, he started to get distressed. He would begin to cry and would state that he should not look at those parts of women. This resulted in him saying that he is a bad boy, and he would cry even more due to this. This not only distressed the child, but his family experienced a significant amount of distress due to the situation. This is the first case. The second case is, again, an 8-year-old boy was brought by his mother with complaints, as told by the mother, was a lack of interaction with everyone as well as with his family. These complaints were noted by his teachers at school also. In spite of having normal speech and language development till 3 years of age, his interaction with his peers gradually decreased at school. He eventually stopped interacting with everyone other than his family members. After lockdown, he was staying at home with his family. He did not have any siblings and was an only child. He would watch TV continuously as he was not allowed to go out and play. There was no form of peer interaction. As the lockdown extended over months, his mother noticed that his interaction with family also started declining. For the past 1.5 months, the child stopped talking completely with everyone at home. This caused his mother to worry excessively about the nature of his problem. Though this particular case can be a form of developmental disorder also, the effect of lockdown had on the child in one aspect to consider, as it caused a lack of external stimulation, and as he had an unlimited access to several gadgets, this eventually led to the lack of communication. The next case is, a 10-year-old boy studying in a government school was referred from Department of Neurology. He is the second child and he had an older brother. He had a history of frequent headache in the occipital region, precipitated whenever he gets angry, irritated or frustrated, and he had unprovoked anger outbursts, aggressive behavior, and constantly wanting to play games on the phone with his brother, and he would constantly fight with his brother. Despite interacting well with his family, he would keep throwing a lot of tantrums and fighting with them to let him play on the phone. If they did not give the phone on his demands, he would get angry and try to throw the phone or even break it. On waking up daily, he would demand for a smartphone. First thing, he would want a smartphone. Before lockdown began, he was a very playful child. He would love going out and playing with his friends. He would adjust well and was quick in making new friends. He would enjoy outdoor games. After lockdown, he started using smartphones excessively. He would demand his parents to give him the phone, and if not, he would yell angrily and would start hitting his parents. This demands and use of his phone eventually led to frequent fight with his brother. His mother stated that the past 2 to 3 months, he became more demanding, even more aggressive and impulsive. Discussion. Before lockdown, children had a structured routine. They were not under constant supervision of their parents, and they were allowed some independence. This population is particularly vulnerable to the effects of long-term confinement. Absence of a structured setting of the school for a long duration can lead to a disruption in routine, boredom, and lack of innovative ideas for engaging in various academic and extracurricular activities. They can also be more clingy, attention-seeking, and more dependent on their parents due to them always being available at home. Confining children and adolescents to their home is associated with uncertainty and increasing anxiety, which may eventually lead to disruption in their education, physical activities, and opportunities for socialization. The only means of being occupied was access to the internet, television, using cell phones, to access social media apps like Facebook, Instagram, as well as playing games in their phone. The constant supervision from parents turned out to be more problematic than usual. This is not only invading their independence, but also created many trivial issues between the family members. Apart from this, being confined or isolated for a prolonged period caused behavioral changes in many children and adolescents that their parents took out of context to the given situation. Many of these behaviors were actually within normal range, but parents being constantly at home, the otherwise normal behavioral changes were perceived as abnormal, which lead to an increased number of psychiatric consultation for the children. Conclusion. The above discussed cases showed the effects of lockdown on children as well as several psychological problems associated with it. Isolation or confinement, inability of the family to provide an age-appropriate explanation for situation, unclear information of the purpose of the lockdown, and lack of structural activities and a clear routine can all lead to irritability, frustration, and agitated behavior in children. It is important to distinguish normal behavioral changes from abnormal ones in specific situation, in this case, the COVID-19 lockdown. Help should be sought from a psychiatrist if a child or adolescent exhibits symptoms of severe and intense anxiety or depression, suicidal ideation, or marked irritability associated with lockdown. It is important to remain alert for development of symptoms, including changes in appetite, sleep disturbances, fear of being alone, or social withdrawal. Many measures that were implemented were focused on improving and sustaining an individual's physical fitness. There are so many precautionary, preventive, and protective measures taken, but hardly any efforts were made to improve, sustain, and strengthen the mental health of an individual, especially children. I conclude this presentation with a quote like, physical health add years to your life, whereas mental health add life to those years. These are my references. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Just a few clarifications. And what was the IQ of all was it normal, all of them?
All three children's IQs were normal, sir.
Normal.
And they did not have any previous history of mental health condition.
Did they fit into any diagnosable disorders, DSM-5 or?
No, sir. They did not
just
fit
a behavioral changes.
Just a behavioral change, just started in lockdown, especially the second lockdown.
Any correlation with any increased usage of mobile phones, smartphones?
No, sir, we didn't actually check that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller. So with that, we conclude the free paper session at this hall, C Hall.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the wonderful presentation. Now I welcome Dr. Rajaram to hand over the memento to Dr. G. Ramanujam.